Yeah. You know, we talk a lot about the fires, we talk a lot about the lake and all the rest of the stuff, you know, and one of the things that comes up in the press is their version of what's been happening with the weather, and then the issue of El Nino and what it's going to do to us this year. And I thought I'd just talk about it a little bit from the standpoint of what the climatologists talk about behind the scenes that they don't pick up. And one of the nice things about either being the state government or county government, in this particular position, you get a lot of briefings. And I do know some folks, so I was able to get some slides as well up here. So what you have to start with is moving back far enough so you can actually get an idea of where you are, and then find out if this thing works. Okay, I'm going to have to... Yeah, I could just swing this around. All right, so there's our sun, and that's where it all starts. Our weather really is all about what energy we get from the sun. You start with that, you wonder what the next part of it is. Well, the sun itself is spinning. Of course, we're going in that direction. And as you can see from this picture, which is very nice, you'll see a kind of a band of blue that goes right into South America. And then clouds that spin off this way, clouds that come up this way. It all has to do with the fact that the equator is moving over 1,000 miles an hour, and then of course as you move north, that spinning is a little bit less, till it's theoretically zero at the top. And so any cold air at the top that's sinking, any cold water at the top that's sinking, it has to be replaced by warm energy, water that's going north, and any warm air that would be going north to fill back in. And it's of course going fast because it starts at the equator. By the time it's going over the ground and approaching the north, it's going pretty fast. Maybe well, at 1,000 miles an hour slows down quite a bit, and it becomes a jet stream. Everybody hears about that. That whole system of jet stream, clouds going north, warm water going north, is a energy distribution system. So our spinning planet, our weather system is all about energy. The second thing it's all about when you talk about storms is the differential between the two heat energies. It's either it's very cold at one end, very warm at the other. The differential of temperature basically develops the strength of the storm. And so that strength of the storm is only there if you have that differential. So when you talk about this stuff, you talk about global warming, if you warm it in one place and it's cold in another, you're going to have some very energetic storms and systems that go through the planet. You're talking about that now. It's not always going to be that way, and I'll show you why. Here's clouds are generating here in Lake County. It's all come from that. And here is a sea surface temperature anomaly from a satellite. This is 1984. I love this one because we got some pretty good rain that year. And this one shows the sea temperature differences. I hit a long pole. Right look at there. Right there. We'll see some blue, and what that is upwelling. So temperature or water that's moving back away from the landmass brings cold water up from the bottom, and those are what ordinarily would bring very, very rich bottom waters and wonderful fisheries. And so that's what you want to see when you have your fisheries, and also for your salmon. That cold off the coastline is our good ocean conditions that bring salmon back into the streams. This is the kind of thing you want to see. But we had a lot of rain, we had floods that year. And yet this is the one that I like to look at from the standpoint of the standard. Now here is what we've got today. This is a pretty recent satellite photo, and this is from a geostationary satellite about 20,000 miles out. And so you can kind of see that there's quite a bit of difference in the red, and that there's a lot of contrast. This particular one shows the contrast between the types of weather that would really produce strong storms. If those temperatures actually manifest itself into sea surface atmospheric conditions such that you would have a lot of moisture. So if you have a lot of surface moisture, and that surface moisture started to travel, then you can get some storms because one surface air mass would travel over the top of the cold air mass, and you get some tremendous storms. So when you see that, you say, aha, strong storms are coming. Here it is, what is the date on it? It's October. This is this year. This is really different. This is amazing. This is the El Nino condition everybody talks about. It's very, very strong. As you can see, there's my pointer. Right there, we've lost all of that upwelling, and there's not very much. Somebody has a nice pointer.
Yeah, somebody's got one. I knew somebody had one.
Oh, you got one. All right. Well, listen, blind pilots. You can't use it if you're blind pilots. Okay, so you can see also that we don't have any blow up here, but here's Hawaii down here, and there's some upwelling right there. So the water surface from the blow is coming up, and you're going to get a little bit of fisheries there, but they want to see this all around. This should be very large. You should see there's a little bit there, but this really should be all the way along here, and it's not at all. In fact, if you look, there's hardly any contrast at all. These are very, very, very poor ocean conditions for fisheries. You're not going to get much salmon. They're going to be in poor condition. There's not going to be much feeding. You're going to get sea lions, the pups of sea lions that are going to look pretty emaciated. You see that in the press today. This is the reason why. There's no upwelling. There's no young fisheries there for these to feed on. And so we're going to wind up with a lot of wildlife that's going to be stranded. It's going to be a poor year for them. And of course here, this thing is ordinarily not there like that, like I showed you the earlier one. And when it does form, people call it the El Nino. If it's smaller, it's the El Nina. And Nina, is that right? And so that means the price job. Now, with that said, and the other fact is that you don't have those temperature differentials that you would think with rain, hot weather. Strong weather, we do have the normal wintertime El Nino pattern that's been set up. There's an extended Pacific jet stream. That's that stream that's moving along that was started by the equator. It's moved north, and of course it's going faster than the surface of the earth, and that becomes a jet stream. The storms come in behind that, and it pulls it right along. And you see we're way up in here, and this wet is down below us, and they're going to ordinarily get all of those patterns of weather below that is from that strong temperature differential and moisture differential, if it's there. Sometimes we'll get strong storms and it won't have any rain behind it. It's still a storm. It's a windstorm with no rain. It just didn't have any moisture. Now here's where...
Can we go back one spot, because I learned something when we were on our Antarctic trip. You know how in our politics we're talking about building a big wall between Mexico and us? Well, what they predict in the future is the wall is going to be built at the Canadian border to keep Americans out as the growing area starts going north.
Yeah, you know, it's really true. I mean, he's talking about a slightly different topic, and that is the fact that global warming, that area right there is becoming larger and moving more north. And when they say warm, it is getting hot, where it seasonally would not ordinarily be. I'd love to do a kind of a debunk on global warming sometime, because it's different than the press, again, reports it. There's a person, a Jim Steele, that wrote a book on global warming that's really a good read. You ought to catch it sometime. And I found out about it because somebody claimed that I was a global warming denier, yeah. And I said, really? I said, yeah, you wrote a book. And I read it. It's a really good read. So I agree with Jim Steele, who wrote the book. And just look it up. Okay, now this is what I was trying to think earlier, was the Schussel algorithm, but it's the water vapor. And this basically is not the temperature. This is the actual water vapor that's above the surface, and they have a way of teasing that out of the satellite photo, and so they can see where all the water vapor is. It follows the temperature line, and it's a very high water vapor line that follows that temperature because it boils up out of the sea surface. And you can see that over here right now, it's not as well developed, but sometimes we'll get a real hot zone right there, and we'll get a lot of water vapor coming up. But now just imagine that all of that air that's moving this way because of the globe spinning, and then has to move north to replace air that's sunk. By then, in the one area it might be a high, and the high is going to circulate in that direction. That means it's going to have a lot of barometric pressure, and if there's a low, it's going to circulate this way. And those two circulation patterns can be such a way that it will squeeze out a little bit of this moisture and it'll shoot it like a stream right there. And that is that atmospheric river that everybody talks about. It's because of the setting of the highs and the lows. Ordinarily, this high is sitting up here blocking the weather, and the lows will push the weather down from the north, so the jet stream will be coming down like that. Here's where you get your storms that have the snow behind it, have the cold weather behind it. You've been getting some of that. You may get that the rest of the year. But unless this high will move down here, a big low moves in here, and you set up that atmospheric condition like this, where it'll pull all that water vapor right out of this condition here. If that happens, then it can just aim it like a hose. And it can be just about anywhere it wants to be along the entire coastline of California, sometimes down to Baja, but usually it's the coastline of California for some reason. We can get one heck of a lot of moisture. And if it pulls it from far enough back, if this red moves up here where the Hawaiian Islands are and gets sucked into that, it'll really give us a big flood. So it isn't so much about all of the conditions of the El Nino as it is that the El Nino has produced a lot of vapor, and that vapor then is big enough, the big enough vapor pile, so that when this condition happens, it's able to suck it right off and push it back up.
Was '04 a flood year?
Do you have a current one?
2004 was a flood year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have a current?
That's the best
Yeah,
explanation.
that's pretty current, February, I'm sorry, that's '04. I don't have this one, but let me show you what I do have. Here's the other thing that I wanted to talk about. That's what is sea level anomaly. All of that hot water that's sitting out there, it's expanded, and so it's a high level compared to when it's cold. When it's cold, it's down lower because it's all shrunk. And so this hot water here is kind of pushed out in a big bubble, and it can be as much as a foot higher. So the sea state may be a foot higher. When they talk about, we're going to have future sea states that are going to be a foot higher, well, you got them right now. This is what it's going to look like in that projection. Now, if you were to add this on top of that projection, then you got 2 feet higher. And so this is the kind of situation that's going to exacerbate any kind of sea level rise. And the Sacramento Valley will then be quite different as a result of that. You can see from here that in the past this has been tracked. There's been several times when ordinarily this very high, there's our 2015, ordinarily it's right here, and when it gets very high, it can travel very, let's see, way up here to about a foot. We're right there, and we're expecting that it's going to go high because the conditions are just the same. You saw how hot the temperatures were. And if they remain hot like that with high sea temperatures and a high level of expansion of water, and you get the winter, which has warm waters on top of it with all that moisture coming down, it's got to escape into an ocean that's got a higher level. And so what's going to happen when the water comes down and hits that high amount of ocean? It's going to back up. The water does back up when that's the condition. So you want the ocean low, and you won't have that. And that's what's being projected. Here's a case where you have high tide and that high footage down in San Francisco. And this ordinarily has 6 or 7 feet underneath that bridge. This is water that's coming down and can't get underneath it. Now, a 7-foot tide plus another foot is 8 feet. And if you have water coming down backing up, then it's higher even than that. They may be 12 or 14 feet down in San Francisco Bay. And that's what it spreads out into the wetlands and the rest of it. So this is a condition exactly like that that is taking place. Here's a large storm. This is a low pressure storm. You can see that it's spinning in this direction and then back into the center here. So this particular storm is one that you can see the gigantic size of these things. They move in a direction of least resistance, and then you're going to get your storm cycles. So you can see how massive they are. Some of the pictures I had were so massive they wouldn't fit the frame. So I picked this one just to show you that we can have massive energetic storm systems. And obviously this can happen simply because if there is water that's moving down, it doesn't have a place to go because all of the sea temperature areas are higher, the sea is higher, the water is higher, and we have a high tide. Then it all backs up into the rivers, and that's what the condition that happened here. And this is not even one of our situations where we've had the El Nino year. This one was one where we had all the other conditions of backing the water up, and it kind of killed the levees and flooded out. Back in the day, 55, I was in a house, of course I was just that high, in a house in Yuba City, and that's what happened, is that there was a lot of pressure on the levees and the gateway, and we lost the house as a result, right off the foundation. But it was not a good Nino year. So here is a situation that happens a lot of times. People build right at the end of a debris chute. That is an old debris chute that's been there for thousands of years. We have them all over this county. I see people built right at the end of debris chutes all the time. The period of reoccurrence for a debris chute like this might be 100 years, might be 1,000 years, but definitely it will be again. In fact, my house is built on the top of an old landslide, which is 100,000 years old. And it all looks like a consolidated area. As I look across at Mount Kanaka, I see houses all over the top of an old slide there. And then next to it, I can see a bunch of debris chutes. And so we have this everywhere, and we do have the potential for this occurrence.
Excuse me, Jim, what is a debris chute?
Thank you. A debris chute is just basically that particular feature right there, where all this material that you see down here came down the side of the mountain, and it cut loose because of a lot of moisture, a lot of high floor pressure. From the moisture, it cut down and started to slide. It gets lubricated, and then it moves down the side of the hill in the old chute. And you can see them as you drive along. You'll see where the hills are like this, and then they carve out, and then the next finger does the same thing, and it's just sculpted all the way along there. If you get out in the middle of the lake and you look back, you can see active landslide features right now. Caltrans hauls away an active landslide every year. It's just a little bit of time, you can actually see it starting to slump down. If that were such that it would all move at one time, then you would have a debris chute, and it would be carving out another one of our features. I actually was standing looking at a harvest site, and we heard a rumbling, and there was a bunch of foresters standing around, biology. We heard a rumbling, and the guy says, "Oh, we better stand back." He says, "What do you mean?" He says, "This has happened before," and so we all stepped back up the side of the hill, and one of these things came right on through. And it was called dry ravel, where the hill unraveled because it dried out. You get lubrication from water, and you also get a holding power. And so when there's too much water, it's lubricated, it can move, and if the water dries out, everything can fall apart, and it can dry ravel or unravel by itself. And this was a dry ravel slide. So the debris chutes happen for a lot of reasons. So, we don't want to lose our head.
That's great.
Kids will be kids. They will find a way. Yes.
Going back to our last subject that you talked about, I had heard, and maybe you know, and maybe not, that you can kind of tell if a property is landslide or not by the trees. If the trees are growing straight, or if they're at an angle. Is there any truth to that?
Yes, there is. If the hill moves a little bit and the tree is growing and it moves it and does that to it, then the tree will try to geolocate again.
Yes.
And what it'll have is a nice pistol butt. That's what it's called. It looks like a pistol. Yeah, in fact, there are places around the whole county where you can see pistol butt trees. So it moves at a very slow rate, and trees will then try to compensate. Move at a faster rate, you won't have any trees. So if you look, you'll see there's places where there are no trees, and that's because there's no deep zone for the roots. It's all slid away. So trees don't grow there, no deep zone. And that's where you only get the grass. And you'll see that as well. It's features for a geologist. When I was a branch chief, I had geologists work for me, and engineers and scientists of different types, and so I get this schooling all the time. So we'd go around and they'd stop the car and say, oh, look at this, That's an area of concordant formation. Thank you very much for that. Over the course of years, you finally found out what concordant formations are. Okay, we lost our head, but here's what the storm or the flood track looks like over a period of 75 years. Now, right in the center is the normal year. That's the normal rainfall, and we can actually get floods during those times. If all those other conditions are there, we can get floods. Water can back out of its banks. The banks that you see, the channels you see, is not the channel for the water. It's the flood zone is really the channel for the water. If you look at the valley, it's a bunch of channels that have meandered back and forth, and we've tried to keep it all in a bank. So our idea is that people on the bank, that's not necessarily where the water wants to go, but that's the ordinary flow year. Well, I'm telling you, my fingers don't work. That's the ordinary year, and then we have our droughts, are these expanded areas right here, and we're in a drought right there, and then these are the floods. Now, the thing that you see about floods that are reoccurring, they kind of come and go when they want. You don't see anything before that, it was quite a ways. But, let's see, 64, 55, you guys probably remember.
37.
37. All right, but the droughts last longer. You see, they're a more expanded area. Those droughts merely mean that for the state average, we don't have what we think should be the average, and therefore we've declared it a drought. But this is all very normal cyclic weather. It's kind of trending, even though it's cyclic and it's up and down, it's kind of trending such that people believe that we're having longer and longer droughts. Well, that's more of the extreme weather that we're talking about between those temperature extremes. We can have highs that sit out there for a long period, we're going to get a drought. If we don't get the highs sitting out there for a long period, then we may get a flood or we may get normal weather. It's all about the high over the Pacific Ocean. So, what do you want to think about all of this? You know, left, do I think right? Is there something pending doom right over the top of my head? People wonder. Here's the deal. What does a strong El Nino mean for California? Here's the takeaway. These are all the El Nino years that are notable, and this is what happened as a result of the El Nino condition. Well, back here, 2 years, well, it was 55 that had the flood. It wasn't really an El Nino, but we had the water year of 57, 58, very strong El Nino. We had a good wet year for the whole state. Very dry in the water year 65, 66. And here's the water year with the strong El Nino was, near normal. Here's very wet, 82, 83, very dry, 91, 92. Here's a very wet water year, 97, 98. In other words, nobody's going to be able to tell you what the heck's going to happen. That's really the story. And yet when the press, oh, get ready for the flood. Well, you could have had a flood last year. You almost did. The way the conditions were set up, it just didn't happen, you know. So the way we prepare really should be for every winter. And what we do for the areas or roads and all of that should be normal conditions. We should have a department that does nothing but look at the whole state and make sure all of the counties are up to snuff from the standpoint of the state agencies. And they try to do this, but they really rely on local people. It's a big state. But these conditions can be any time, just when there's an El Nino, and it can be any time when there's no El Nino. And that's a real strong takeaway. So when you read it in the press, you say, the conditions are right for that atmospheric river to have high moisture levels and be aimed at us. That's what El Nino means.
Yeah.
That's really what's
That's
going
a
on.
great explanation.
So, should we move the statues?
Ha!
Oh, yeah. Isn't that a great picture?
Yes.
Where is that?
It's in India. All right, here is the seasonal temperature outlook concurrent with today, November, December, January of 2015. And what they expect is for that time, this is a computer model, so take this with a grain of salt. It's actually going to be warmer than normal up here, a little cooler than normal down here. That's kind of generalized. And it's going to be a little wetter down here. Well, you saw that pattern that was set up. And that was the pattern for that normal El Nino condition. And they expect that those normal El Nino conditions will happen for January, November, December, January of 2015. It'll be below us, right there.
So the one on the right is the projection for the coming couple of months?
Yeah, this is the November, December, January 2015 projection right now with the computer model. The thing about it when it projects out like that is if the conditions change and they redo the model, the whole projection for the months in front of you could change. So it's not really a projection, it's just what the model says. It's not reality. But it is saying, we think everything's going to be pretty normal, except if one of those atmospheric river conditions forms up, and no one can predict that, as with the models right now.
So these weather forecasters are actually weather guessers.
They're guessing, but they're guessing, got to tell the story. Back in the day, before me, in Japan, they used to have fishing vessels that were spotted out through the Ryukyuan Island chain and to the south, and they had a set of signals that they would put lights up at night, the weather's pretty tough out here, and the next boat would say, whoa, and they would raise the same warning lantern, and that series of signals would go to Japan, and they would get about a 3-day warning before the weather hit. And it's better than the predictions of the models today with satellites. And they just don't have the lights anymore, and they don't have the fishing boats like they used to, but that was actually better than models today. But here's what they predict for February, March, and April. Here's the seasonal temperature outlook. It's going to be a little warmer. That means we're picking up some of that flow down here off of and anytime it's warmer up here, we're picking up that flow down here off of the coast of Hawaii. And here's what's going to happen. They think that we're going to get that atmospheric river condition in February, March, and April. So it's going to be later in the year. It's going to be springtime. We're going to get flooded. That's what they're saying. Our El Nino may happen then. Of course, it could also happen tomorrow. But on the other hand, yeah, so when you get down to it, you look at all of the models really say, you really should have been getting prepared much earlier than now. For all of it, from the standpoint of fire, from the standpoint of floods, from the standpoint of life, you guys really got to look at patterns as not being able to, something you're not able to control. You certainly will not be able to control this. Everybody's talking about the weather just a different way. You talk about it as affecting you more.
Jim, is that what they consider when we always hear Pineapple Express?
That is the Pineapple Express. It's when that atmospheric river sets up, and it's one storm after the next, and it's just little cuts of storms that come off like that, one after the next sets up, and you'll have storm after storm after storm, and the ground won't have time to drain. And what happens on these surfaces along here is what's called sheet flow. And sheet flow is where the ground will not soak the water up anymore, and there's kind of a film of water that's over the top of the ground. Even though the ground looks like this, it will not soak it up anymore. The rain keeps coming, it turns and just sheets right off. And it can pick up everything and move it down, and you think, how did everything up there get down here? And it's because of the sheet flow. And you can actually see examples of where sheet flow happens all over the place. Want to know what happens up here on South Cow Mountain, where you can't see erosion ditches, but the surfaces are big and disappeared? Wonder where it went? It's sheet flow, and it's because of those conditions where the water will not soak up anymore, and it just takes the sediment away right off the top. And I was on a search and rescue mission once where we were in the middle of the night with our flashlights looking back and forth, and I said, whoa, look at this. And the high school kids that was with me, the K-Corps, said, what are we looking at? I says, well, this big canyon we're standing in, and it was huge. As a matter of sheet flow, all of this material, which was tons and tons and tons of material, had all slipped away over the years without any erosion features at all. And it just disappeared. And you could see it if you knew what to look for, and of course being around all those geologists and people and scientists would point that out to me to the point that I could see it myself. Anybody can learn to look for that. It's kind of neat. So the high school kids and I stopped looking for the lost person for a while. We found a little later. That's another amusing story. But in any case, they say, yeah, we're going to have some bad stuff coming. So water weather year types, here it is for 75 years. And you can see it's highly variable. A lot of drought years, a lot of wet years. It's up and down, up and down. Has nothing to do with El Nino in this particular graph. The average annual precipitation in California has more to do with its location on the globe and its geographic features, and the fact that along the coastline you have the mountains which will stop a lot of weather, and if it's powerful enough to push over the top, then it'll go all the way over here against that geographic feature, and it will back up against it. The clouds go over and they back up in such a way that it piles up, and then you'll get your rainfall in the valley. You get the rainfall down here, but ordinarily you don't get much rainfall. We are a desert state, and in fact all of this right here will stop the rain from getting over here, and they are a real desert state because of this geographic blockage that happens. And so when the weather comes in, ordinarily it will block off right here. And so the weather would come down here, more likely will come from that direction and drop it here. If it sets up in a less likely condition to be a Pineapple Express, then it'll come up from this direction and it will be a fire hose, and wherever it hits is wherever you're gonna get the floods. Sometimes it's down here, sometimes it's up there, sometimes it's right over your house, and you can't predict where that is.
We need a crystal ball.
Yeah. This is, I kind of like this, snowpack water content. I look at this because I'm a skier, and back in the day when we really had glorious days of skiing, and that's 100% snowpack, here's where we are right now. You think we have an anomaly for snow? Well, what's the change? The change is we have not had the conditions that bring the moisture in when we had storms, but didn't have the moisture that brought it in when we had the geographic relief, pushed that moisture up high in the mountains and then dropped it as snow. We had the storms, but we didn't have the moisture content. It's all about moisture content. Why did we not have the moisture content? We had a big high sitting out there, blocking off those warm, high water vapor areas from getting in. So it's all about the water vapor. If the high sits there, we don't get it. We may get the winds, and we get no snow. So we can see that. And no skiing. Did I say no skiing?
Next week is gonna be good.
Oh, man, I'm telling you, I'm going. So here's where I'm looking at do we have the culvert set right? Something wrong with this picture. This slide I usually show, this is why we don't have any fish in this particular stream, is because the return rate on the water flows that will fill up the water below, such that it will come up here and fill in a flow rate that is such that the salmon can actually get through here, is probably 1 in every 50, 60 years. And that doesn't fit the life history cycle of the salmon very well. That's why we didn't have any in this particular stream. So they're asking me as a consultant to tell them what to do. Yeah, it's kind of easy. But here's the thing that happens with these kinds of culverts or perch like that. The sediment back here, notice that my instrument is sitting right on top of the stream. The stream is here all the way up. It backs the sediment up. If you were to take this feature out, then what would happen is it'd be a head cut all the way back, and then you'd have all that erosion down below, and you'd have a different kind of problem. And here's another example where the flow that coming out of here is just like a fire hose during the winter. As the backflow has generated a low pressure area, and then all this sediment is moved away, and it gives a perched culvert. Fish can't get in here. That's a blockage as well. When the water is high, they can't get through because the velocity is too high, and when the water's low, the water is too thin, and the culvert's perched, and it's just this. As Jeff says, it's a no-brainer. It's one where it just, that's the way it happens. So here you go. In Lake County, lots of streams, systems, a lot of collection of streams here, and moves run down through the Rodman Sloughs, the Middle Creek area, and so about 70% of the sediment that enters the lake comes from that area. A big portion comes from here, moving off because of the ground disturbing activities out here. But actually, as you see around the lake, this line right there is the drainage, but this over here is going in that direction. So that's the Cache Creek drainage, and over here along that side is our drainage, and this part doesn't affect the lake very much. These are very small drainages. What I did was every year when you have the storms, I drive around and look at all the drainages. I've done it for the last 6 years to see who's been naughty and who's been nice. And not so good for such small drainages. And why? It's because the off-road vehicles are tearing up the hills. And this is over in the paper sub areas where the kids can get back there and do that.
What are the red dots?
Oh, those have to do with chai locations for going up. And, this is, I borrowed a map. It has to do with a different study.
Jim, what's the situation with the county's restoration of the reclamation area, restoration to swamp and filter of the stuff coming down?
That's the Middle Creek restoration. Yeah, they're still buying properties, and they have to buy quite a bit of property before they can start any kind of restoration.
So there's no restoration yet. It looks like there's some of the area that is being restored to swamp.
There is money coming in where there's work being done from the federal government, but from the standpoint of the whole collective of design and restoring so it is a functioning wetland as it should be, that's still in the future. But as we buy up properties and they go native, then it both creates a problem and it creates a solution. That's another topic for another story, but it really is what I hope is going to be the future of the lake. Will have a lot of that sediment drop out of there. And we change a lot of the upper watershed uses so that we don't fill it in with sediment and make it useless in a very short period of time. Both things have to happen at once. For Clearlake, we're all about the Grigsby Riffle. This is the natural lake. If ordinarily during the winter, all of the rain comes down by the time spring is done, the rains are done, after a very short period of time in the summer, we're back down right here to Grigsby Riffle, and that would be the normal lake. So it raises up, and then it comes back down right to there. Adding the dam keeps the water later in the year. That's the difference. And that dam actually starts at a lower level down Cache Creek, starts at a lower level, is higher, goes back up to about there, and about there. But you can see that once the water gets to this point in a native stream, then Cache Creek should be drying up, and that dam shouldn't be getting any water. And so that makes us a natural lake. We don't want the Grigsby, in my opinion, it's controversial, we don't want the Grigsby Riffle to be disturbed. I'm going to show you the disturbance. There's the Grigsby Riffle at 0 Rumsey. The water is flowing. How interesting, you know, and it's fact, it's about almost 2 feet in some areas. I don't know exactly where the shallowest area is because that's the controlling feature. It may only be a foot, but I found areas that were 3 feet deep. And that's the channelization that was taking place by people from Yolo County trying to get more water during the summer back in the day before the dam. And it might even been back in the day after the dam, I don't know, but the Beverly, the tree, and the rest of it had to do was don't do this digging anymore. You're affecting our natural lake. And so that's why some people were calling and asking me, they're saying, there's water going out the dam, but we're at 0 Rumsey. This was a couple of years ago. And so I drove over and took this picture. Well, yeah, geez, look at this, neat feature. They messed with my Grigsby Riffle. All right, so here's what happens during the winter. Not just because you have a dam, but it is in fact because you have a dam, but not necessarily just because then, because if the water comes in so fast that it can't drain fast enough, then what will happen is it will back up above the Grigsby Riffle. It can be 10, 12, 11 feet right in there. It can be that high. You got flooding. A lot of people's kitchens and backyards and whatnot along the lake, they get flooded. That's because it comes in so fast it can't get out fast enough. That's what controls it. And a lot of folks will say, well, let's take that down so we can get a lower lake and have more room for water to come in. That has a lot of negative consequences to it. It's a couple of positive and a lot of negatives. I won't go into all that, but that's part of the discussion. But here, you see the water back here, that's because of the dam. So that's 7 feet right above it. That's the 7-foot Rumsey everybody talks about as being the lake full with the dam in place. That's a good thing for Lake County from the standpoint of nutrient distribution and loading. And for a lot of reasons, keeping the nutrients of the lake longer in the summer, when there's the most nutrient, and then letting it out for the dam, we are actually draining those nutrients out. They would not be available to drain out if we had natural Grigsby Riffle levels during the summer period when we have the highest nutrient loading. But why do we have the highest nutrient loading in the summer when it all comes in the winter? So keep that thought in the back of your mind. Here is this is a natural stream bed. It's actually a road, but it looks like a natural stream bed, and we have a lot of those. It shouldn't have a foul web going down like this. And that basically is what a lot of our roads look like, and that's part of the problem. Here's another side of the hill starting to create a stream, and that's erosion feature. This is not a sheet erosion. This is actually the kind of erosion you don't want, where it's a down cut, and we have this everywhere. I could have showed you 1,000 pictures just like that. That's the problem we have. This comes off the sediment. That comes off in a solution, and its turbidity in the water. We have high phosphorus in our soil. It's naturally high because of the volcanic soils here, about 10 times higher than the national average. And so when it comes off, a lot of that phosphorus goes into the lake. The phosphorus that's locked up in the soils is ordinarily not very available, except if it's a legume or something like this, not very available to our plants. And so when it gets into the lake, it's just not available phosphorus. So you would think that it would not be a problem. Here it is coming in, and of course there it is with regard to the Middle Creek area. All of this right here, this is long after the storm, so some of this sediment has settled out. But all of that feature right there is from these streams that have come off of there. And this one here is primarily right from there. And those are the two big features for the lake for entering sediment in. And then we've got Ziegler Canyon, down here pushing back the material that is stored here. It pushes that back up, so you can start to see it there, and right there you see the drainage from up in the High Valley area. Right there. But you can see right there that these all short coupled streams. They should not be giving us very much, and late in the year they don't. Right there's some material coming in. So that's where all of it comes in. You can actually see the phosphorus signature of that soil. It all settles out right after that. You don't see that phosphorus signature anymore until later in the summer. You see the phosphorus signature again. And so you see it here, then you don't see it. Well, this signature is from the sediment, the siltation that you see that's in the water column. That settles out. That signature of high phosphorus is when there is no sediment in the water column, and the water column would ordinarily be clear except for the phytoplankton and the cyanobacteria that's there. What happens is the phosphorus cooks up out of the sediment during the summertime. When it does, that's when we get this particular signature, and that phosphorus is available for cyanobacteria. The winds will blow the cyanobacteria from this end down to this end, and it chokes up down here like that. There's high cyanobacteria right there. All of these are actually dead cyanobacteria from released phosphorus that is taken up. And when it dies, lice, and is in the surface of the water, then you see this kind of a signature. So in any case, that's phosphorus that's cooked up out of the sediment. So when we get all of these high rainstorms, you're going to wind up with this condition late in the summer under certain years. And then all of those conditions that I'm talking about kind of cook together, and I didn't talk about a bunch of others, but a lot of it comes together, and you can say, uh-oh, bad year. Well, why has it been good for so many years? It's because of the drought. And because it's been locked up in the sediment in such a way that the top surface has already drained off all of the phosphorus out through the dam. And now we've got this kind of low phosphorus layer over the top of the bottom of the lake, and we're going to wind up this year adding more to it. If we can figure out how not to add to it, you're going to wind up with a beautiful lake without it being added to so much like it does right here. And this is 2011. This condition was set up in 2008. That's the condition. And it's been 9, 10, 11, 12, and at in the middle of 12, it all stopped happening. We've had a beautiful lake ever since I saw it. Did you have a question?
Yes, I understand there's springs in the lake,
There are springs in the lake.
and do they contribute to the water level at all, or?
A little bit, not very much.
Not
Actually, the
significant.
science I saw, it's, you got to take a grain of salt. This is the science that we have that speaks for science. We should have an ongoing program here that just absolutely gives us information all the time so we can learn to manage the lake. From my point of view, let me be political just for a second. From my point of view, in 1994 was the Clean Lakes report. There was enough science in that. You would take that report and convert it into management programs, and today you wouldn't have the problem that you do. We haven't been able to make that conversion into management programs. It just takes, that was the whole idea of the half-cent sales tax, was to try to do that conversion. But the voters couldn't see through that and see what it was they were voting for, and they're right. You have to be able to see it. I can see both sides, and we don't have it for them to see.
Jim?
So here is, yes,
Could you go back one slide? I have a question for you.
okay.
This is something that I've always wondered with our, okay, right there. What'd be interesting is when this was taken and the wind direction that was taken, because are we picking up algae in the bright red? We've got to be, because the oaks arm is just completely loaded. And what I've noticed is when we have our normal wind direction, it doesn't really go down to Clearlake as much as it goes all the way to the oaks, like it's showing. It doesn't, because the way the islands and stuff are set up there, and the way the point sticks out, it's amazing, especially with low water.
It'll just
It's
suck
almost
right in.
completely blocked off where it can't come through, because it'd have to go really around the corner. And that's what you're really seeing down there. But if you notice on the lower end, it's not packed in.
That's wind is blowing in this direction.
Yeah, see, but at the same time, you look at the top little arch, just off of Canocti or above Canocti, yeah, a little bit lower, that arch right there, that's wind driving it down and compacting it down there. But because we don't have a sewer system all along that whole side where the red is, that's always been my theory, is that we need to get a sewer system along that side, because nutrient-rich water, it's cleaned, because of the earth it's going through. But are we still getting a loading over there where the bright color is? Because there isn't any agriculture to speak of over there.
No, it's actually a different feature. I spent a lot of time on that question, because when I saw that, I said, okay, what do we have for numbers? The numbers speak differently. And so we have to have more numbers. It's a nice theory. And I would be on your side for putting that theory on the table and testing it. The problem is that the numbers that we do have, when you go back and tease them out and say, what do I have down here that really speaks to a surface condition that pushes it down into that area? This actually, as a result, I have a lot of other slides. I mean, I could go on quite a while on this topic alone. I could teach a class on just how this moves. It's just amazing how much information we have. But this is from lysed cyanobacteria cells. This little back perturbation right there, if you were to look at it from this standpoint, as the wind blows across the surface, it picks up that cyanobacteria with waves. You've got to talk about Langmuir lines and a lot of other things. But anyway, it's pushing it towards the predominant direction, and that's to the east, from the west to the east. Every once in a while we'll get east to western wind, and what happens is the water has to be replaced, and so I'm going wrong here, so I'm going to hurry. The water has to be replaced. It goes surface water, and it comes back up here. In order to get the condition where the wind will push it back up here, and the surface water will come down and replace it, and then this condition right here where the water comes up like this, and the upwelling, and it all moves back like that, it takes a very long period of wind for that to happen. So you get a little bit of surface perturbation, but you don't get it like you do with all the westerly winds that happen every single day.
So you have westerlies every afternoon.
Every afternoon, and that is a standard condition. So I looked at it from the standpoint of cyanobacteria, what produces cyanobacteria. It's the ratio of phosphorus to nitrogen. That ratio imbalance, when you have too much phosphorus compared to the nitrogen, is the signature for cyanobacteria as opposed to phytoplankton. If you had a higher nitrogen, you'd have a higher phytoplankton loading. You want to get away from your phytoplankton loading because that's also a sinky mess. And so what you do is you put all of your sewage in a pipeline that runs like this, goes up to the geysers. What you get is predominantly nitrogen. Now you have an imbalance between your phosphorus and nitrogen. You almost guaranteed yourself cyanobacteria blooms under certain conditions in the lake. And do you have any kind of septic that's driving this thing here? No, that's nitrogen. That is not what's driving the system. What's driving it is too much phosphorus, too much sediment. Get rid of your sediment, but get rid of your cyanobacteria. It is almost, all of the literature of all the lakes of the world are pointing to the same thing now. Those ratios are driving what happens.
Jim, the last couple of years we've had a clear lake, very little algae and very little lake smell. What accounts for that?
The drought, because the top layers of phosphorus that's boiled up into the lake, and that phosphorus has gone out through the dam. You lose about 15 to 20% of the phosphorus that comes up out of the sediment every year through the dam, and we give it to Yolo County. It's a good thing, because if it doesn't get replaced, 20%, 5 years, 4 years, 5 years, you're going to wind up with very low phosphorus levels in the lake, and you're going to get clean conditions. That's the result of the drought. So now you're going to wind up with a lot of rain. You're going to wind up with reloading the lake. This is an island that's formed off of the Middle Creek that was not there when I was here studying the lake in 1976 and 77, and that island was not out there. That's all very fine silt that has come down into the lake, and that produces a lot of that phosphorus, and then that phosphorus and cyanobacteria moves in the direction. I mean, so are we doing things that we shouldn't be doing?
No seagulls.
All right, seagulls sitting on top of a no seagull sign. And then, of course, the skies are getting cloudy, and we've got to be careful or we're going to wind up with another cyanobacteria situation. This is where cyanobacteria dominates the surface, and other things can't grow underneath it. And there's a whole story behind that, and I'd love to make that presentation. Sometimes it's almost too long when I do it, but I want you to understand that there's a lot of conditions behind this. And yes, it is becoming predictable. And in fact, the very bad cyanobacteria that leads to toxic water conditions are becoming more prevalent in the world lakes today than ever has been in the past. Because the conditions are there longer with longer, warmer weather, longer, warmer waters, then more species can set up the water column, cyanobacteria species and phytoplankton species, and set up the water column for these very toxic, aphantazomanons and anabenas and the rest of them that gives us the toxic conditions. And finally, I think I'm done. I think that's my final slide.
So,
There you go.
okay.